Good evening. My name is Cody Casey. Today I'm going to be talking about understanding students with ADHD. So, I'm going to talk to you about some of the characteristics and some of the ways you can handle some of these or handle a student with ADHD in the classroom. So, how many students are being served with ADHD in the U.S. right now? So, reports by the Disease Control Center for Disease Control Prevention in 2016. The reports show that 11% of all children in the U.S. have been diagnosed with ADHD. Okay, so what is ADHD? It is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, a chronic condition that affects millions of children and often continues into adulthood. ADHD includes a combination of persistent problems such as difficulty sustaining attention, hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior. And this came from Mayo Clinic. So some of the things about that is some of the problems are with children often struggle with low self-esteem, troubled relationships, and poor performance in school. Um, ADHD is one of the most common mental disorders for children, and it's estimated that 8.4% of children and 2% of adults have ADHD. So ADHD by the numbers. According to the Science Daily News in 2011, 12% of the U.S. children and teens had a diagnosis of ADHD, and this increased by 43% over that 8-year span. So this came from a study based on parental reports from ADHD diagnosis. It came from, once again, the CDC, the Center for Control of Disease Control and Prevention, and then so the girls showed a sharp rise in that year too, because as I'll read later, boys is more likely to become diagnosed. But the estimated number of children are ever diagnosed with ADHD, according to a national 2016 parent survey, is 6.1 million or 9.4%. This includes 388,000 children aged 2 to 5 years, 4 million children aged 6 to 11 years, and 3 million children aged 12 to 17 years. And boys are more likely to become diagnosed with ADHD than girls, so that 12.9% is boys compared to 5.6% of girls. So, what is causing the increase? So some of the reported things are things like poor sleeping habits, and this came from according to Psychology Today. But poor sleeping habits can lead to attention deficit disorder, lack of structure, too much indoor. So lack of structure would be like their home life. Some students struggle with their home life, and that could lead to some of the things with ADHD, and too much indoor living, being too kind of reclusive, and then addictive use of video games. And then, according to the Center for Disease Control, there's no known thing, but it's unknown, but genetics certainly play a role. So hereditary could pass it down. So now I'm going to talk about the specific behaviors and characteristics of a student with ADHD. And attention, hyperactive, impulsive behavior are the two characteristics. It can be mild, moderate, and severe. And attention is mental focus. Hyperactive, impulsive is movement. So inattention is like things like failing to pay close attention to details, have trouble staying focused in tasks or play, be easily distracted, and appears not to listen even when directly spoke to. Hyperactive and impulsive is like fidget, squirmy, difficulty staying seated, too much movement, Oftentimes they struggle to stay in their seat. They talk too much, interrupter to others, blurts answers, interrupts the teacher as well. And then difficulties learning and participating in school. Inattention, so this leads to making careless mistakes in schoolwork, which leads to struggle of failing of schoolwork, and then troubles following through on instructions, so that leads to failure to finish schoolwork, and then avoids or dislikes mental focus, or tasks with mental focus, so like homework, and of course they're going to struggle with that. And then hyperactivity and impulsivity is like disruptive, so to other classmates and teachers, which can lead to not only just the learning environment being affected by that particular student because they're disrupting, and then does not follow follow rules and procedures in the classroom, so they struggle to understand what's being asked of them. That's another struggle for a student with ADHD. and then maybe in trouble often, so they'll lose out on quality learning time. So those things about not following the rules and procedures, having trouble knowing what's asked of them is oftentimes one of their main struggles with participation in school, learning, being included in the classroom, and so that's some of the problems. So is each student with ADHD the same as the next student? So no one student with ADHD is the same as the next student with ADHD. So that degree of behavior, it can vary. It's not the same. So this can range from mild to moderate to severe. There are 3 different subtypes as well of ADHD. Predominantly inattentive. The inattentive has the characteristics of inattentive or inability to focus. That mental focus. And then predominantly hyperactive has to do with impulsive, hyperactivity, and those characteristics of that hyperactivity, that movement, and then combined is one of the subtypes is the mix of both. And so now we're gonna hit on under what category does IDEA 2004 do students fall? So where do they fall in that category? So students with ADHD are eligible to receive special education services. And ADHD falls under category of other health impaired, not under specific learning disabilities. So often students with ADHDs qualify for, an IEP plan in their school, or a 504 plan is often given to a student with ADHD. That's very common. And so now I'm going to talk about some effective class-wide interventions. So academic intervention is things like giving minimal directions, because students with ADHD often struggle with that. Providing written directions and steps. So, really breaking it down to them step by step, because they struggle with staying task oriented. So if you break it down into smaller parts, which is what I talk about here, break tasks into smaller units. So you want to provide a visual model of a finished project, but you want to break tasks into smaller units, doing things like allowing extra time for completing tasks. Provide work breaks. Assignment notebooks are going to help them organize things, because oftentimes students with ADHD struggle with that as well, organizing. And they know where each assignment is for each subject. And then homework partners, it can be good to have a peer with them as they go along. Helps them stay on task, as they have someone pushing them instead of them, daydreaming off. And then opportunities to respond. Cooperative learning is things like giving student a role with clear expectations. So then they see the outcome of their, and they see what is expected of them. And then learning games could be things like it's needed for students who need more immediate feedback and recognition of their effort. So things like bingo, or even learning games online like iReady, where they can see they won coins for finishing the lesson. Then reinforcement strategies, so are like corrective and verbal feedback, which is like constructive criticism, like being positive with them, but telling them, like being concise about the rules, like they're getting out of their seat, like state the rule. The rule is we don't get out of our seat unless we raise our hand and ask. You have to be clear and concise, and then praise. Just if they have good behavior, the key with ADHD students is to praise them. When they be enthusiastic and positive when they do have that desired behavior, and that's just a good way of reinforcing those students with ADHD, because they need to hear they're doing things right, but also at the same time you have to constructively criticize them. Sometimes they just need to hear the clear-cut rules on it, and I think that's very important, is giving them that feedback. A lot of ADHD students need to hear that feedback to understand and know what's expected of them, because oftentimes they struggle with, remembering that type of thing. And it's keys to working with, in my opinion, with ADHD students is, number one, be positive with student. You have to be positive with them. You got to kind of see from their perspective. You got to see where they're coming from. They're struggling with different things. You got to kind of, and that's what I talk about on number 2, find innovative ways to help aid with the students, with the student with ADHD, accommodate to their needs. They struggle, to stay task oriented. They doze off, find ways to accommodate to that, give them some break time, take, kindergartner out on a water break, things like that can go a long way with these students. And then just being positive, not letting they're going to be disruptive. That's just the case with a lot of ADHD students. They're going to do things, get out of their seat and blurt out, and you just got to stay positive with them. You can't let that affect what you're doing. You got to stay positive and pick them up and understand where they're coming from, really. And then here's my resources page right here. And that's it. Thank you.